Hello, hello. I warmly welcome you to this reading, in which we'll see what's going on in the head of the man thinking about you. So I think quite an interesting reading ahead of us. We'll see what's in his head, in his feelings, in his emotions, and of course what you can expect from this person in the next few days. So I warmly invite you to this collective timeless reading in which we'll discover and check all of this, how it looks. So I think it will be interesting. I encourage you to listen to the end because each card in this reading can reveal additional important context, so I think it's worth listening to each card at least a bit to have some kind of overview of the entire energy that will appear here today. We're starting with the King, with the Knight, with the Knight of Cups, who in this first position as such a first signal means, well, a romantic, someone who seems to be running to you with flowers. So this image shows a man who carries in his head a certain emotional narrative, one very charged with imagination and even idealization. So this may be someone who, in their thoughts, builds scenarios in which the relationship with you has a very soft and romantic tone. Even if in reality he can't fully show this, well, something is sitting in his head regarding this. Besides this, there's a lot of fantasizing about contact, about what could happen, or what it could look like if you both opened up or took a step toward each other. So this is the vibe of a person, I would say, who can spend hours wondering what he would say, how it would be received, and how the other person would react. But of course he doesn't necessarily take this step, not in this direction, but rather thinks about it more, and somewhere analyzes every possibility. So this card speaks of someone who experiences emotions more internally than externally. So there may be a slight chaos in his head between what he feels and what he wants to show. You can see a sensitivity there that makes every word or gesture from you trigger a whole series of interpretations and expectations in him. He can get himself worked up positively, imagining that something is going in the right direction, even if from the outside it looks neutral. On the other hand, through that same sensitivity, he can also overanalyze small signals, like what if she doesn't feel this, what if I'm exaggerating? And this is present in him like a wave that sometimes carries him toward optimism and sometimes slides him toward hesitation. The Knight of Cups also shows someone who has a tendency to idealize the other person. So in his head, you might be placed on a certain pedestal. This can mean that he attributes to you qualities that you haven't expressed outright, or he imagines certain things that aren't there at all. And this is supposedly good, but on the other hand, maybe he's building certain expectations that completely diverge from reality. So he creates in his head a story in which contact with you is something very special, even if in reality it's still unfinished or broken off or uncertain. There's a certain romantic tension in this that he feels, and I feel it very clearly. This can make him flow more with his heart than with logic. In practical situations, this might look like he wants to write, but thinks long about the words, because he'd like it to be in the right tone. He might also have scenarios in his head of conversations, meetings, or emotional confessions, but stop at the planning level, because he's afraid he'll do something too early or inappropriately. Sometimes the Knight of Cups shows a person who has emotional courage only when they have a sense of full acceptance. And if he doesn't feel that, he prefers to act subtly. Yeah, so this can lead to a situation where he releases something into the air with such a delicate gesture instead of an open declaration. But, he sends you this letter, sends you this message that's supposed to be ambiguous, supposed to mean two things at once. And however you receive it will be good for him, because in a certain sense, your reaction will determine what happens next between you. And that's nice, that's convenient for him. However, there's also a lack of concreteness. But actually, in the middle of all this that I see in him right now, there's one important thing. He's experiencing you more than he's showing. His thoughts are going toward emotional closeness, but his body and behavior might stay half a step behind. This is someone who would like to open up more broadly, but does it in stages, testing the ground. So you can see the desire for there to be some fluidity, softness, pleasant flow between you. He can imagine the potential, but he's afraid that if he moves too quickly, the whole thing will turn out to be just a very lucrative illusion. And here this shows us, I think, quite a substantial picture of the current situation, but let's see what's next. 5 of Cups to this Knight. 5 of Cups, which is certainly a card of collision, in the sense that this card in the context of that card is such a colliding card, showing that between his romantic imagination and what's holding him back inside, there's a considerable difference. But before that, I wanted to invite you to the website arcanemoonshop.com. If you need a private reading, you'll find such a reading at arcanemoonshop.com. So I invite you. You can click the link in the description and go check out what's available there. Meanwhile, the Five of Cups, which, besides what I was saying, besides this collision that appears here, shows us, well, exactly because the Knight of Cups talks about someone who fantasizes about contact in their head. And the Five of Cups shows that these fantasies are constantly gnawed at by fear, fear of loss, or the feeling that he's already messed something up between you. So, I don't know, if something kind of happened between you earlier, well, then perhaps he has this feeling that he ruined something, for example. In any case, he may have the impression that something happened between you that means there's no longer full comfort, like you could be closer, but something slipped through his fingers. So specific situations may be stuck in his head where, well, he simply feels he said too little, pulled away at the wrong moment, or even overestimated your interest. This is the vibe of someone who looks at what didn't work out instead of seeing what's still open. So more practically, this combination often shows a man who wanted to catch up with you emotionally, but lost his confidence along the way, and he could have set a romantic tone and then suddenly fallen into the feeling that he made himself too soft a version, or that you reacted differently than he expected. And this could be a situation like, he sent a message that you didn't reply to right away, and his mind started racing. Oh no, I overdid it. That was stupid. Maybe I shouldn't. Maybe you shouldn't see this sensitive side of me. He interprets trivialities as failures, which really messes with his emotions. As a result, he remembers more what disappointed him than what draws him to you. However, the Five of Cups also shows that in his head there may be specific regrets or longings that don't have a complete connection to you but still affect how he experiences contact. And here it could be about carrying within himself such earlier relationships where he trusted too quickly and someone pulled away. So now every silence or distance from you he perceives as a repeat of those stories. So, he interprets these small steps of yours as something big, precisely because perhaps in the past someone who responded rarely or not entirely regularly then, for example, ran away or stopped contacting completely. Between these cards you can see strong emotional tension, meaning he feels that it could be beautiful, but at the same time he worries that it's already too late for something, although in reality it doesn't have to be like that at all, right? In his head there may be scenarios circulating that he wasted some opportunity or didn't show himself from the right side at the right moment, and this is kind of the guiding energy here at this moment. Although, well, the Eight of Swords in the third position, meaning the card that completes this disappointment the most here, I would say, and in such a context that, despite the fact that the card is rather associated negatively, even the image itself is quite unpleasant, because it's a person sitting in such a prison of swords, bound with blindfolded eyes. And here, well, precisely this blockage that he has is very mental, because the Eight of Swords is always a card that emphasizes, in fact, that it's about a very mental blockage, not necessarily typically that, he can't do something or some external factors influence him making these and not other decisions. This card often precisely talks about the fact that a person sets limitations for themselves, and here you can see this very clearly. He may think something like, I can't reach out first, I can't show emotions, I can't make a move, because she's probably not interested anyway. So these thoughts don't stem from facts, but from his own interpretations of this whole situation. And you can see that he is currently rather weak in this, at least that's how I perceive it, in the sense that, well, this is a strong projection, so I perceive it as something that is rather primarily a product of him and his imagination, of what he was looking for, and not entirely based on facts. And this is exactly what the Eight of Wands always shows. So we can hear, the Eight of Swords, so we can infer from it that this is more a product of imagination than truth, to put it bluntly. So all of this adds up to a picture of a man who really has a tremendous amount of emotions in his head towards you, but at the same time is so afraid of these emotions that they've become an obstacle. He doesn't have a problem with not caring. The problem is that he cares way too much in a way that takes away his freedom, and the Knight of Cups would like to sail. The Five of Cups looks at failure, and the Eight of Swords says that's exactly why it's better not to do it, because something bad happened, so it will probably be the same now, and it's better not to do it, right? So it's something that is a blockage that is actually more of a projection than a real obstacle. Meanwhile, in the fourth position, we have the Wheel of Fortune, which promises something, I think, nice, meaning something better than before, let's say. The Wheel of Fortune always speaks of movement. So in this spread, it shows us that attention in his head there's a growing sense that the situation between you is slipping out of his control, meaning he was already torn before between a romantic pull towards you and regret over some failure of his own and a blockade that doesn't allow him to make a move. However, now there's added to this is the thought that everything is rolling on its own, that his actions or lack of actions create a domino effect that he can no longer stop. So in his head it looks like something is changing and I have no influence, which cranks up his tension even more, and he may feel that if he doesn't seize some opportunity, it will simply slip through his fingers. Simply put, as if life decided for him. Well, this could also be related to your patience. Like, not to advise, but for example, you feel that this is already something that's slipping out of control, that it's been too long, and well, how long can one wait? For example, the Wheel of Fortune itself often appears when someone is experiencing such repeating cycles at that moment. And here it has a very concrete dimension. He may see some kind of repetitiveness between you. Sometimes he's closer, sometimes he's further away. Sometimes he feels hope, sometimes he's disappointed. And in combination with this Eight of Swords, it looks a bit like he's trying to catch the moment when everything will turn around. But at the same time, he's not doing anything to speed it up. So he lives with this feeling that maybe fate will arrange it itself, maybe it will change on its own. So there's not really any action, but the situation is also such that you can't suddenly extract something good from it. So lack of action, lack of a good situation. So here I'm talking about your patience, because it may in a sense be running out if you feel that it's actually heading in a not so great direction. Because you can give someone a chance, but time is also precious. But this shows that at the moment, his thoughts are a bit short. Emotional images, fears, hopes. Well, yes, but these hopes are something that, for me is a situation where you kind of have him under control at this moment. This can, of course, change, but actually today he feels a bit that he's under your control in a sense. Of course, under emotional control, because I don't think you're keeping him in a cage, I hope. Though maybe such a cage would be useful for him sometimes. Laughter. Anyway, yes, that's how I feel it. That it's like, damn, he's relying on fate. On you more than on himself and his own decisions. As if, he pushed that first domino, and now it's going, he can't stop it anymore. He can run, but he won't make it in time. Eight of Cups in the 5th position as a card that in this place shows a very clear moment when, a thought about withdrawing begins to mature in his mind. This is not a typical cold cutting off, nor an escape plan. It's rather exhaustion. Exhaustion with the situation, exhaustion with what appeared here somewhere, perhaps more from his side than between you two. However, you can see that something here started to wear him down, and he feels that, since he can't stop this domino effect, maybe it's better to leave, for example, in the sense of leaving, to kind of distance himself from you for now, see what that brings in general, right? Perhaps, for example, he tried to approach before. It didn't work, because the Knight of Cups talked about that too. It didn't work. Some disappointments appeared, bad feelings, unpleasant projections. So he decided that maybe he'll put less effort or his will into it somewhere, let's say, and I'll try differently instead. Maybe step back a bit, maybe give himself a break, leave it to fate, to its hands. And you might feel this too, right? That at one time, let's say, something was different there, now it's different, and this affects your relationship, positively or negatively. Here, obviously, depending on your individual situation. However, you can see that currently, he's trying to take a step back. This isn't the end, this isn't suddenly who knows what, but a step back from him that you might feel in the coming days. But as I'm saying, it's not like suddenly there's an end here, right? This is dynamic energy, so calm down, no worries. And finally, in the 6th position, the Queen of Cups, which appears as the 6th card, as a card that somewhat softens this ending. This is also exactly what I'm saying, that there are no dramas here. There's nothing like, suddenly it's the end. This is a card that, in this place, acts like a powerful spotlight directed at you in his head. After all these chaoses, blockages, these little messes, sense of loss, and this temporary withdrawal, he reaches a moment where he starts to see you as a person who emotionally means a lot to him, that you are someone important after all, right? And I think this is such an important moment that makes him realize, above all, that for now he doesn't want to give up on this relationship. Even though something unpleasant appeared here, a thought that perhaps this isn't it after all. For now I don't want to give this up. I want to take a step back, gain some distance, perhaps more towards myself as well, and then try to continue. I think that's how I currently see it. So these next few days might be, a light step back and then potentially action again. So here it's like a break, or well, maybe more of a breath than a break, 1 to 3 days. That's what it might look like currently, so that's what you can expect. So that's all. Thank you very much for listening to the end. I invite you to arcanemoonshop.com for a private reading. In the meantime, I wish you a beautiful day and all the best. Talk to you later. Hey,